Week 5 of college football is upon us, and we start on Friday night with a Utah Utes team that is playing lights out on defense, going against an Oregon State Beavers team that's coming off its first loss of the season. These are two teams that can play defense really well for the most part, and now you just have to figure out which offense can stand out and can do its part. I think that both sides have compelling cases and very interesting seasons to discuss, and the Pac-12 is a loaded conference, as we've discussed all year. It's just a matter of how much chaos will be created in week 5. We'll start with what can the Utah defense do to continue the success? Can they do it again? Can they do what they did last week, which is allow just 7 points and keep UCLA pretty much away from the end zone? This is a defense that continues to play at a high level, and they didn't even have all of their starters last week. That's this craziest part is they didn't even have their fastball. They just pretty much played with the changeup and it did got the job done. This is a group that continues to be disruptive, to wreak havoc. Last week they had 11 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 2 interceptions, and one of them went for a touchdown, or 2 turnovers, to say one interception went for a touchdown. This is a group that continues to play at a dominant level, and a group that will continue doing that as long as they need to. Now, Cam Rising, can he come back? That's probably the biggest question for this offense because the offense continues to be one dimensional. This is a rushing attack that is solid, but it's not going to matter if you don't have a passing attack to go with it. The field definitely closes up, the sidelines feel closer. There's not much you can do if you don't have a passing attack. And Cam Rising, while maybe not the best passer in college football, is definitely better than anything they have going on right now. He did warm up last week. He did go through the motions there. Whether or not they actually planned on playing him or if they were just evaluating where he was at, probably is the biggest question for this team. If he's able to play, he opens things up for this offense even more. And we've seen what he can do in his career. So getting him back would be a huge addition. And honestly, it's probably what they need. You're not going to win the Pac-12 for a third consecutive year by just playing really good defense. Yes, you need that defense to play well, but you also need an offense that can complement that defense. That's something that Oregon State kind of has, but we saw them struggle last week. We saw them struggle to keep Washington State off the scoreboard and they struggle to get going. And one thing is we're going to look at is how do they bounce back? At 35-14 halftime deficit against Washington State was just simply too much for them to handle. They proved though in the second half, which I talked about in the recap of that game, that they can move the ball really well. I think DJ Uyunglele plays a huge role in that. They can move the ball efficiently. They can create explosive plays. And I think one thing they really need to do is get DJ more involved in the rushing attack. -5 yards in the first half last week against a Washington State defense that wasn't exactly the most elite unit, but they were able to wreak havoc on that Oregon State offense. They have too much talent on this Beavers offense to be able to be stifled once again, but you are facing a Utah Utes defense that is no joke. You have to find a way to move the football. And I think getting DJ involved more is something that needs to happen because you create confidence by getting him going in the rushing attack. That allows him to make some big throws, to be able to hit guys in stride. And against a Utah defense that will give you plenty of trouble, you need to find a way to move the ball because it's going to be an absolute battle. This front seven for Utah against Oregon State's offensive line will be an absolute battle. Definitely one of the matchups to watch in week 5. And it's just a matter of how efficient can Oregon State be with their offense because right now we know Utah's limitations. We also know that Oregon State can take advantage of that. This is a defense that yes struggled against Washington State, but Utah is not even close to the same realm as Washington State. So that's something they can take advantage of. They can build momentum early in this game and to find a way to get the ball rolling because this team is too good to lose 2 games in a row. But with the Pac-12 being as good as it is, that's definitely a possibility. And everything starts with the quarterbacks. And we've talked about DJ. The big thing with DJ is we saw all the good. And it's almost like he waits for someone to tell him that, okay, go ahead and start unleashing things. I'd like to see him play more free. And that's been a problem for him a lot. We saw it even at Clemson. There were times where DJ unleashed some really nice passes and he looked really confident and playing free. And then the next moment you know it, he's locking up and playing timid and overthinking things. I really want to see what a DJ Uiagalelei can do for an entire game where he's just unloading everything he has. I think that he is too talented to be bottled up. And whether that's as a runner or a passer, I think that he is much better than his stats indicate. And what we've seen on film so far is a guy who has two sides. You'd like to see the timid guy go away, and you'd like to see second half DJ from last week's game show up on a more consistent basis. Because I got news for you, Oregon State fans. That DJ has to show up if you want to win this game. You have to be able to put points on the scoreboard because honestly, 21 points might get the job done. We've seen Utah score more than that, but unless this offense takes a significant turn for the better, that's not a point total that they really can compete with. I think that DJ and this Oregon State offense have too much talent to be bottled up. Then again, you also saw a UCLA offense that you kind of felt the same way last week. So we'll see what happens. On the other side, if Cam Rising goes, then obviously we'll see him. But Nate Johnson, as a passer, is okay. I think that he has a lot to work on. He has some limitations in his game, and Utah is going to struggle for as long as he needs to work on those. And yes, you can run the football. You can find ways to win football games like we saw last week, but your offense has to contribute more. I think that's the biggest thing is Utah's offense has to do more. Yes, their defense, and maybe I'm completely wrong, and Utah's defense can find a way to win a football game by themselves again. They scored 7 points last week. The offense only scored seven, so they scored 50% of the points you needed to score. So maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're thinking the wrong way about this Utah team. This is just a really good defense, and it's an elite defense. That there's nothing taken away from that. Just the offense has to put some pressure on themselves to elevate their game because the defense will only do so much, and eventually that will end up in them caving a little bit, and that's going to cause a lot of problems when you face better offenses like the USCs, like the Washingtons, like the Oregons. Those teams will create more challenges for this defense. And yes, you're getting talented starters back, but it needs you need your defense to take a step forward. You need your defense to step up in a big way. And right now, they're just not going to be able to do that. I think that this offense has some question marks. But the biggest thing is going to be the quarterback position. Now, there are plenty of other players to watch on both sides. I think on defense, Jonah Ellis had an absolute monster game last week. 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. And he's just one of the players you need to know in that front seven. Cole Bishop is also a Mr. Do It All for this defense, has a little bit of everything in the box score, and he is a good leader to run that defense. Now, a player that I'd like to see get going a little bit more, assuming that he's healthy, is Jaquindon Jackson. He's someone at the running back position that a lot of people expected big things from, and so far we just haven't seen that yet. Going against an Oregon State defense that appears to be better than a lot of people give them credit for, but also is looking to bounce back after a tough week, that's going to be tough. You have to find a way to be physical. And yes, right now we talked about Utah's offense being one dimensional, but they do have talented players like Jackson that can make a big impact on this game. For Oregon State, a player that we're not talking about enough is Damian Martinez. I think he's an absolute stud of a running back. He is showing that he can be a factor in the passing attack as well, and that's huge. Deshaun Fenwick also had a big game last week, and I think that this is a group of rushers, including DJ2, that can be one of the best in college football. This offensive line is very physical. They have their hands full with this front seven of Utah, but you're looking at a group that can run the football and can make an impact that way too. I think on the defensive side of the ball, you have to pay attention to a number of players up front is really where it's going to get the job done. Because if this front group is able to slow down Utah's rushing attack, then Utah is forced to do something that they're not comfortable doing, which is throw the ball a lot more than they want to. This is an offense that does not want to throw the football very much. They want to be able to win football games with low scoring affairs. They want to be able to pound the rock and keep this pace to a crawl almost. And it's not that Oregon State goes at lightning speed. They can. I don't know why they don't more often, but this is definitely a pace that Utah wants to be slower. And if they're able to do that, you're looking at a game that tilts in their favor. Taking this game is tough because what we saw from Utah last week is that they essentially said, we don't need an offense. We'll figure it out. And they did exactly that. This week, it feels like it's a little bit more of a test. It feels like even though Oregon State's coming off of that tough loss, the Pac-12 appears to be, like I said, super loaded, super talented, and that could create some problems in terms of keeping everyone healthy, keeping everyone undefeated. And right now, Utah faces a tough challenge. If DJ and that offense can get the ball rolling and can get things figured out, I think Oregon State wins this game. I don't think Utah can hold them off for too long. Oregon State, unless they're somehow Utah finds a way to shut them out and gets a bunch of those starters back, then I think that Oregon State is the team that will win this game. And if I'm wrong, it'll be yet another strong performance by the Utah Utes defense that continues to justify our thoughts that they are one of the best, if not the best unit in college football.